I think you can always have the conversation beforehand.
Oh, how
Um,
would you have it mechanically? Because this, again, like this, the experience had really shaken them. And it had really, like, sort of like to their core made them realize that, like, going out into the world and doing these things, like, it's kind of dangerous. And they're putting, that's a downer of a story, I know.
that's all right. No, death is supposed to be sad, and the two stories
I'm,
I have are funny and then very happy. So
okay, great.
I'm glad yours is a more accurate representation. I am doing my first collab today. We have a guest. Maitreyi, do you want to introduce yourself and where they can find you?
Yes, hi. My name is Maitreyi, and I make system agnostic tabletop content on Maitreyi Plays Games on YouTube. Um, I am a decent D&D GM, so I have a lot of videos about D&D as well. So yeah, thank you for having me here, Dennis. This is very
No
exciting.
problem. I'm super excited.
This is
We
great.
already did first half. That will be linked in the description. Go watch part one on Maitreyi's channel before you continue with this one. We've already gone over all of or a couple of the important questions about how to create a character and how to integrate a new character into a world, whether it be a one shot, whether it be the beginning of a long campaign, or if it's in the middle of a long standing campaign. Now we're going to go over what happens when those characters end. So, my first question for you is, do you always need to have a conversation with a player before killing their character or before their character dies?
This one's an interesting one for me because I feel like if it's a combat death and it's like strictly a mechanical death where your hit points come down, like, and you fail your death saves, like that I don't know that you can have a conversation ahead of time because that is an unexpected thing for everybody, really. And like no one goes into combat expecting everyone, like, you expect it to be hard, maybe, but probably, but no one's expecting like party death. And so whenever that happens, I feel like that's kind of surprising. And so I think I don't know that you can have a conversation about that ahead of time, but certainly after it happens, like I think it's challenging because you want to let the player kind of feel their feelings about it because like I said, it's a surprising thing, and it's maybe unexpected, maybe unpleasant if they were particularly sentimental about that character, and take it from there. If it's a narrative death, however, that I think requires discussion. And what I mean by narrative death, I'll give you an example of a real thing that happened in my game. The world that I run, nature magic is illegal. And one of the characters was playing this like really impulsive young adult, and in he was the spectator in of this event where this really high level enforcer of the temple was attending. So the people who put these laws in place about the nature magic, like, they're like super like intense cops, and to give you like a stat block, they were a solar, like that's
Oh,
yeah.
wow. Okay.
Yeah. So like to get to the a solar was in attendance. This character roll, and man, this was so brutal. Like he just like rolled to see if he would have a reaction to what he was seeing, and what he was seeing was very cool. And he launches a nature magic spell in the air to out of excitement or whatever. The enforcer immediately sees it and like one shots him, basically. That is a narrative death to me. And so what I ended up doing was I actually asked for privacy with this character, and had a private conversation with him and said, hey, listen, in this moment there's two things that can happen. Either you're dead, character has no way of coming back, and like, I'm really sorry, but but like, we talked about this moment happening. It wasn't a surprise for you that this person was there. Like, you were like 5 feet behind them, you knew they were there. Like, this is something that you chose to do in game, and now there are consequences in the game. So, there's a couple of things that we can do this moment. One is either your character dies and like, you know, one shot we can give you this epic hero's death, and like, you know, it'll be a plot point and that kind of thing, or we can have you leave the game, come back at a later date when you and I agree on, as a completely different class with no magical abilities. And we'll build a narrative for that as well, where like, these enforcers have like removed your magic, removed your soul, and like, it's ended up being like a big story in my campaign. But that to me was a narrative death, and that does require a discussion. And I think it's completely appropriate to ask for a few minutes with the player when it happens. And that's what I did. It ended up going a lot better than I expected it to. The character wanted to come back as a non-magic user. So it's like this big story point of like, you know, how did they remove this magic from him? And does he now like want to get it back? Does he feel sort of empty without it, or is he trying to rebuild without it? It's a really interesting place for his character to be, but we wouldn't have gotten there if I didn't have the conversation with him. So for narrative, I'm gonna say yes. For mechanical, I'm gonna say it's probably not possible. So that's my very long answer.
It was a complicated question. I'm not gonna get mad at you for giving a long answer.
What do you think, though?
I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. I think you can always have the conversation beforehand.
Oh, how would you have it mechanically? Because this, again, like, this is
right. A combat death is going to be a surprise every time. But whenever I'm like, I'll do it first at the start of the campaign. I'll say, okay, what kind of campaign are we going to be running? Is this going to be Dark Souls where death happens like every other session? Or is this going to be much easier, more storybook like campaign? It's not Game of Thrones. This is closer to Harry Potter. People don't really die until the books get dark at the end there.
Sure. So death means something.
Right. And I'll talk to them about that and say, feel out, you know, what we want to do for this longer campaign. And then I will do that again every single time every time I plan a really difficult combat. So if they're going up against something that I'm not sure if they can actually beat, I will ahead of time say, okay, what are you going to do if you drop to 0 hit points and fail your third death save?
Oh, it's awesome.
What do you want to happen at that point? And I will do that with every single player before that campaign.
Had answers for that? Like, have they been able to like give it some thought? And
usually they can. It really depends a lot on whether they feel the stories that character's story has been completed or not. Like I'll do like personal quests for them where the whole party goes to the home village and like clears their name or whatever. And if that player has had that quest already, usually they're like, yeah, this character's story has been resolved. I'd be okay with dying for his friends now.
Right. Oh, I gotta start doing that. That's awesome.
I don't always do it. Sometimes I've had times where I didn't plan and I didn't expect it to happen. When that happened, I said, okay, yes, your character is dead. Let's start making a new one.
Right.
And
Right.
in that moment, that player is upset every
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
2 days later, that player is excited to play a new character and it's like, yes, I'm
Exactly.
so glad
Yeah.
that character died. I didn't really like him anyway.
Exactly. Yeah.
So like it's really rough right at the beginning to
Yeah.
have that unplanned death.
Yeah.
Um, and it gets better with time as they get excited about a new character.
Sure. Sure.
And that kind of leads into my second question for you is what do you do if there is an unplanned death? Where do you go from there?
I with an unplanned death, I have not had a really intentional way to address it. Like this is incredibly revelatory for me because I'm like, wow, that's a great idea. I should start doing that. So for me, an unplanned death is unplanned in every sense of the word. That I don't have a plan. So when that happens, apart from honoring that player's feelings in the moment, I don't really have a specific direction that I want to go. So I will, I think, probably say to the player, like, not probably, I will say to the player, how do you want to move this forward? Like, what do you want to happen from here? Do you want, like a brother to show up to avenge the death, or like do you want twin sister to just appear so you don't have to change your character's physicality at all? Like as so I don't have I don't have a plan for that. But now that in speaking to you and sort of getting to the point that I would like to have some kind of caveat, like either, before combat, before my games, that like, listen, like if this is going to be a hard combat, if someone dies, like what do you want to happen? So I think having that conversation, getting some answers ahead of time will help to sort of inform what does happen in that moment. But I've not ever done that before, and I'm really excited to start doing that because I mean, like communication with my players is so important to me as it is to you as well.
Exactly.
So
Yes, very much.
I'm very excited to have another avenue to do that with. Yeah. What about you?
When an unplanned death happens in my party, I do my best to not let it happen, to always have a plan for if the character dies. Um, Early on, obviously, I didn't have this sort of foresight to have all of these just in cases in my
Yeah.
pocket. I always felt like there were no good options. Either there's a character death that people are kind of upset about because they weren't expecting it and it feels insignificant in the story, or there is some sort of ex machina, like an angel from their deity swoops down and revives them before leaving or joining them in combat. And then it feels like the DM is just like, I made a mistake, and
Right.
this is kind of the band-aid I'm slapping on it. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, this shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel, neither of those options feels fulfilling. And I
You're
had to go through.
absolutely right because now ultimately, like, what you want to do is like you want to prioritize player agency, but I have no idea how to do that.
It's
So sorry
hard.
to cut you off, but I'm just so like vehemently agreeing with you.
It's not easy. Like there, it just feels like there's no good options when a player dies and you weren't ready for it.
Yeah.
How I avoid it is so for my main campaign, the one where I made it very clear character death is on the table for you guys. Like this is probably going to happen at some point, and it did. And we'll get to that story in a bit. But what I have ready for it is in my document for that says, these are all the villains of the campaign. This is the main plot of the campaign. Here are the events. All the way at the bottom of that document I have a long, drawn out paragraph of what you experience when you die. So I am ready, like I always have that ready, so I can like cut, paste, and like email it to them in the middle of the session so that they don't have to sit there and do nothing after their character dies.
That is incredible.
And
Okay,
so I
after
have
this
it built
call, I'm
out.
gonna get you to share that with me.
Yeah, and I can totally like now that the campaign is almost over, I can link most of that in the description or just paste it in the
Amazing.
description for you guys
Uh,
if you want.
Amazing.
Um, but I have that all drawn out. So like I had to go through and figure out what happens to souls when they die. And what do they experience? And in short, they go to the fugue plane where Kalemvor, the god of death, and his angels judge them and then send their souls to an outer plane depending on their
That's
deed in
awesome.
life.
That's awesome.
And for every different player, I have a different result because a lot of them have, deities they worship or
Sure,
claims on their souls from devil contracts or something.
sure.
And I have different descriptions for each player, like, okay, for this character, stop here and paste this in instead. So that it's not all just like cut and paste. You all get the same thing. It is specific to every single character.
Right, right. That is very cool. I it is occurring to me that I don't have any of that for any of my players.
I hadn't heard of anybody else having this either. This is just an
That's
idea I had where I was
a
half
real
asleep and probably half drunk in bed.
well, it's a great one, so you should do that more. Be in that state more because obviously good things come from it. So yeah.
Other than that, I 100% agree. The most important conversation you need to have with the player after their character dies is what happens next. Because
Yeah.
obviously, like in most cases at least, that player is going to want to keep playing in the campaign. Do they want that ex machina to come in and their character get resurrected somehow and they keep playing it? Or do they want to play a new character at that point and for the rest of the campaign? And that decision should definitely be the player's decision, not the
Oh,
DM's.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think this is where there's some divergence from like um older editions of D&D or older wargaming even like when your character died like that was kind of it. Like there was no what comes next. Like nothing comes next. You died. Like you should
Mm-hmm.
have
Mm-hmm.
survived. If
The
if
end.
you wanted to keep playing, you should have got good. And and I think that's a big. I think that's a significant divergence now, and I for one really like it because I don't feel like character death should be the end of a player in the game. Like, and I think that distinction needs to exist, like player versus character. So, yeah.
So my last question is, what is your favorite player character death story?
Oh my god, this one's actually a little heartbreaking. Because
Well,
I don't
I
have
that's not
like
surprising.
no right. It's I wish I had like a funny like DCC funnel. They tripped on a rock and broke their head. Like you know what I mean? Like I wish I had some like Gonzo funny story to tell you, but I actually my I wouldn't say favorite. I would say most memorable was not even a death. It was a character that went unconscious in a combat. And this character when they came back up, they got knocked out in the combat. They were unconscious for like one round, so pretty minimal. Really no mechanical effects at all to this. So to kind of make it land a little bit more because like effectively nothing happened really, so to make it kind of land a little bit stronger narratively, I narrated that like the experience had really shaken them, and it had really like sort of like to their core made them realize that like, you know, going out into the world and doing these things like it's kind of dangerous, and they're putting themselves in a harmless way, and they're kind of grappling with their mortality in a way that never really had before. And this player really did not like that. Like they really, really felt like I was taking agency away from them by commenting on their mental state after this had happened. And they felt that I had pushed their character into a space that they could not come back from. The player ended up leaving the game. Like, yeah, not the character, the player, and
Yeah.
ended up leaving
No, I
yeah.
even still do that. Like I do my best not to, but occasionally I will tell a player what their character is thinking
Yeah.
instead of what they're, experiencing through senses.
And I think that was the mistake that I made. And I really should have been more mindful of that. And like I feel to this day, I really feel, and I have it a while ago, but like it's it's my like big lessons learned about character death is and again, like, you know, we talk about this, and this sort of the undercurrent of everything we discuss is enabling clear agency.
Hmm.
And so since then, what I've kind of told the rest of my players is that I'm a narrative GM, and like I sometimes just say things because I feel like it'll be an interesting story beat for us to kind of explore. If you don't feel like that's right for your characters, you can say no to me. Like, you need to know that it's okay to say no to me. Like, you can say to me, no, I don't feel like that's how my character would respond. I feel like they'd be more resilient. um I don't think they'd have that crisis of mortality. And I'd be like, all right, cool, that's fine, let's just get through the rest of the dungeon and
Right.
we'll just
Yeah.
move on, it's not a big deal. So that moment let me realize that like a I need to be careful about what I narrate, and B, I need to make sure that my players understand that they're in a space that they can say no to me. Like it's a world
Yeah.
that we're all building together. It's a game that we're
Absolutely.
playing together. So, yeah. Sorry, that's a downer of a story. I know.
That's all right. No, death is supposed to be sad, and the two stories
I'm
I have are funny and then very happy. So
okay. Great.
I'm glad yours is a more accurate representation.
No, let's definitely go to your story now because mine's like brutal.
So, like I said, I have two death stories. I couldn't pick between them. The first one, I think, is the first player character death that I had to deal with in a campaign. And it was in the second campaign that I was running, and I was at college. I still didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't know how to run a good game at that point. We still had fun, which was the point, but I look back on it and I like point out all the things that I could have done better.
Is that
This
always
was
the
one
way?
of them. Um, I had a player in several of my campaigns that lives in a different state now, so he doesn't. We don't play at least not in person anymore. And he's the only quote unquote bad D&D player that I've ever had. And this was because he really didn't ever understand what his character could do, and he didn't understand mechanically when he was under threat. This is partially my fault because I didn't work with him and I knew he didn't know, and I never like impressed on him, you need to learn these things. I never sat down with him and taught him like, okay, we need to make sure that your spells are in a knowable place on your character sheet and whatnot. So this 7 foot tall dragonborn warlock, I think, they were like decently high level. He went in just inside a doorway and was surrounded by 5 humanoids, veterans, I think, which have multi attack. and he was just standing there, and he was trusting his ridiculously high AC to save him, but
Oh
he was still
no.
taking 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 attacks every single round.
Yeah,
We kept
yeah.
telling him he had other options, and he kept going, no, this is fine, I'm fine. He died.
Well,
He died. No,
yes.
he dropped to 0 hit points, and he was far enough away from the rest of the party that they couldn't get to him before he failed his first 3 saves. He was bitter about it for a bit, and then built a new, more broken character, and everything
Amazing.
was fine. So that's one of my favorite stories to tell.
That's
My
great.
other favorite player character death story was actually in the campaign that we were talking about in part 1. My main campaign that is just finished up a story arc. This was possibly the most empowering moment for any of my players. I recently asked them all, okay, what's your favorite? What's the best thing I've done DMing for you? And this player's answer was killing my character.
Oh, I love that. I
So
love that.
they were in a tomb in another player's personal quest. They had found the boss at the bottom of the tomb that was causing the disease inside the town above. And the combat itself, they were fighting a skull lord, 3 skulls, access to finger of death, or disintegrate, one of those 2.
Oh.
Which was a high enough level spell at that point that it could one-shot one of the squishy players.
Sure.
And
As you wanted to, like that, those are like intense spells that need to have intense effects. So yeah.
There was a male drow in the party. And he had expressed to me that after playing him for a bit, he realized, no, I actually wanted this player to be a girl, not a guy. And so I'm like, okay, we'll plan this out. I'm not going to tell you anything though. So one of the last things that happened in this combat, or somewhere in the middle of the combat, was that character got hit with Finger of Death and killed instantly.
Oh wow.
I gave them that sheet that I talked about earlier, the description of this is what you see. And I role played with him at that point, one-on-one, about how he went to Istis, the goddess of fate and the stars. And it was a very, very heartfelt role play moment between him and his patron goddess.
Mm-hmm.
And she provided the character with a new body, a female body to be reincarnated in.
Oh wow, Dennis, that's so beautiful.
And so that is the story of how there's a trans character
I love that.
in my campaign.
I love that. Love that. Love that. It's awesome. Oh,
That
those
was the
are
last
great
question I had.
stories.
Do you have any closing thoughts, comments?
Well, I think one thing we haven't talked about, but like would be a great sort of bonus content. So I'm gonna make a request of you because I'd like to hear you talk about this.
Yeah,
I'd
sure.
love to hear you talk about a TPK. Because I have never been in a TPK and I've never done it. I've never like been the DM for a TPK.
Yeah.
I only know about it sort of academically. So I would, if you have any experience with it, I would love to hear you talk about it. Yeah. This has been great, Dennis.
This has been so much fun.
It's been awesome.
This is amazing.
If we can we do this again? I really want to do this again.
Yeah, we totally can.
Amazing.
I mean, we gotta edit this down for a bit first, but we'll definitely get back on another call and have a discussion about a new topic.
Yeah.
If you viewers have any ideas that you want to see us talk about in the future for our next one, throw them in the comments, please. If you have any questions, we can pick from that list if there's enough of them. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a absolute absolute pleasure.
This has been great and an honor to be here. Thank you very much. Thank you for trusting me enough to be your first collab. So thank you.
It was a good time. It was a good decision on both our parts.
Amazing. Well, thank you everybody for watching, and thanks Dennis for having me.
No problem. And remember, everything is going to be okay.